Hello, everybody. So we are waiting for the notifications to go out. Looks like they're a little slow on a couple of our platforms. So let me go ahead and introduce myself if you're new. My name is Mother Della Morte, and this is my horror gallery. We cover all kinds of dark history as well as cryptids and all kinds of high strange. So while we wait for the notifications to go out and we wait for everybody to file in here, because it does take everybody a little bit of time to get in here, we're going to have a moment of awkward silence. So this is an excellent time for you guys to go ahead and share out to anybody that you think may be interested in these topics. I'll go ahead and open up the comment section so that when people start popping in here, just go ahead and tell me hello. Because we always like to have our regular victims in the crypt as well as our new victims in the crypt. So it does look like we have two people in here already. We have Stephen P. Kitty Cat. Hello, Stephen. How are you? We are so glad you are here. And then we have, let's see, Raven. Raven says hello. And then we have Akia, and she says hello. I'm so glad that everybody's starting to file in here. My notifications have not shown yet, so hopefully you guys got them. If you didn't get them on like some of these platforms, then just go over and subscribe to our YouTube. They're usually really good about getting notifications out and giving you kind of a heads up. Uh, Facebook, it's a 50-50. So go ahead and do the sharing and all the things. And so, yeah, so Aki says she got hers from YouTube. Yeah, I haven't even seen the Facebook one go out, but I mean, Facebook seems to be going the way of the dodo, so we can't be surprised. But anyway, while we wait for everybody to get in here, we're going to give everybody about 2 more minutes before we get started. I just wanted to let you know that this is the season finale for our winter spring season here over on the Horror Gallery. Now, we will continue to do some periodic content, exclusive content over on our Patreon for our $5 tier during our vacation, which we always do take kind of it's like a creative holiday during the summer to kind of get our juices flowing, get ready for spoopy season because it's not that far away, and get geared up for really the season that I enjoy the most, which is our fall winter season. So we'll be doing that to let you know that yes, Stephen P. Kitty Cat will be back. He had some work and just personal constraints that kind of kept him away this particular season because there's a lot that goes into making, especially his content. We call him the professional out of all of us. So it does take a lot to do what he does. And so he just had to take a little bit of a creative break. And we are looking forward to having him back here in the fall. We have missed him dearly. And let's see if there is any other housekeeping that I need to go over. Hang on just a second. We never did have that awkward moment of silence, did we? Let's see. All right, so I'll let you know about Steve. Also, Patreon. All right, so our Patreon, if you have the app, you will not be able to find it in the search bar. That's not because anything's wrong with it or anything like that, but we specifically, because of some of the topics that we cover, we have to mark our stuff as 18 over or not safe for work. So you have to actually follow the browser link, which is up in the description of this stream, and you have to put the HTTPS //www.patreon.com/ the PBDC Collective Inc. So that's how you're going to be able to pull it up in order to find it initially. And then once you favorite it, you shouldn't have any problems. But we did figure out that that's what the problem was, is because we're just listed as not safe for work. So it doesn't show up in the app until you have favorited it or subscribed. Then it will show up for you in the app. So let's see. And I've already told you about the Patreon content during the break. We'll be doing that. It's going to be a little less infrequent than our every other week, but we will have that extra content there. All right. So it looks like we've given everybody a little bit of time to kind of file in and get comfortable. So let's see what's going on in the chat, and then we'll get started because I did kind of want to go out with a bang for the finale for this season. And I think that you'll find this topic really interesting because I want to take it kind of a level deeper than just when you talk about like Dogman and stuff like that. So, and it's a really cool subject and one that I've been wanting to cover. And when I found this particular niche, as far as Dogman is concerned, or this particular area, I was like, yeah, I got to do this. So let's see what's going on in the comments, and then we'll get started. So Henry says hello. Hello, Henry. We are so glad to see you here in the crypt. Yes. So Akia brought up a good point. Do not send us stars. We appreciate everybody that shares our content, which is absolutely free. And we absolutely appreciate everybody that supports us on a more monetary basis. But do that either through our Ko-Fi link or through Patreon. We do have a $1 tier that it's just $1 a month. And you get a shout out. And we may be starting to shoot some extra little things to our dollar tier if you want to help out in that way on the back end and help kind of keep the lights on here. But don't send us stars. It's in my personal opinion, I have to state that it's a scam. And honestly, any um, streamer or gamer or anything like that that you really enjoy and you want to support on Facebook, don't do it through stars. Get in touch with them and find out if there's another way to do that, whether it's just like a one-time donation or if they've got like some sort of tip jar on a different platform, because we see very little as a streamer, us personally. They don't mind taking money from you, but they're very, very weird about giving money to the actual content creator. So I would not advise you to get started. So do not do that. And then Henry said he found several notifications. Well, Henry, we really appreciate you because Henry follows us on several different platforms. So he is double protected when it comes to getting notifications. And he got his on Twitch. And so let's see. Stephen P. Kitty Cat says, oh my goodness, I just watched a terrible movie. You have no idea how I suffered for you. So let's give everybody, let's give Steve a round of applause, for suffering through that. Yes, I have watched some movies before where I'm like, I will never get this time back in my life. So hopefully it wasn't that bad. And then Ivar says, hello, hello. So glad you're here. And she says, Tia says hi as well. Well, hello, Tia. So glad you're here too. And let's see. And then we have HCH Stardust the Clown. And I do believe that you're new here. So let us know where you're from. We always do like new victims here in the crypt. And they say hello or hey. So we're glad to have you here. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. So I especially for our new ones, I just kind of, and I know everybody else that is normally here kind of knows how we do things because we do cover a lot of dark history and things like that. I do like to give backstory. Okay, I think backstories and content, like more content, is important because it kind of prepares you and puts you in the mood or gives you a better understanding of either the person or the time period or the area that we're talking about so that you feel more immersed in the story. So that's why I do that. It's not like I like to just babble on, which I am known to do. But it's because I feel like it's important back information that you really need to know or is interesting to know in order to give you kind of a better appreciation for what we're talking about. So nestled between the misted shroud mountains and enveloped in eerie silence The LBL, which is the land between the lakes, stands as a foreboding wilderness teeming with tales from the supernatural. This mysterious region, with its dense forests, dark waters, and whispered legends, has long been a source of both fascination and dread. It is a place where reality blurs with the macabre and the line between the living and the dead becomes alarmingly thin. So, what is the land between the lakes? Well, the land between the lakes, or better known as the LBL, is a 170,000 acre peninsula in between. It's right on the line between Kentucky and Tennessee. Um, it is located between Kentucky Lake and Barkley Lake. The area was established as a federal recreation area by Congress in 1964 and designated as a national recreation area by President John F. Kennedy in 1963. The Tennessee Valley Authority, or the TVA, initially managed the park, constructing dams to create the two lakes in 1944 and 1965, respectively. The U.S. Forest Service later took over administration and in 1991 was designated as an UNESCO, so UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. The area of land that separates the two bodies of water was known before as between the rivers. And it was known as that since somewhere between 1830 and 1840. Now, after the Cumberland River was impounded in the 1960s and a canal was constructed between the two man-made lakes, land between the lakes became the largest inland peninsula in the United States. This place is huge. And I'm going to get to the comments here in just a minute because I see an old friend has popped in. All right, so the land between the lakes is full of historic sites dating back to pre-Civil War days, remains of iron furnaces, heritage sites, and even Civil War battles were present in the LBL. With nearby Fort Denison to the south, located within the LBL are proportions of the remains of Fort Henry. This fort, now mostly under the waters of Kentucky Lake, saw action in the winter of 1862 as General Grant's Union troops arrived from the Tennessee River, now Kentucky Lake, is what it's known as. Now, the land between the lakes National Recreation Area was once home to over 2,000 families and several small, tight-knit communities. For more than 100 years, the fertile and forested patch between the Tennessee and the Cumberland it was home to many families. Now, with some residents having connections to the slim stretch of land between Western Kentucky and Tennessee, dating even as far back as the Revolutionary War. Now, so why did all this happen? So, in an attempt to control flooding and to generate electricity, basically to get electricity to a lot of rural areas in both Kentucky and Tennessee, the Tennessee Valley Authority, or TVA, built the Kentucky Dam, thereby impounding or basically taking over by eminent domain parts around like the Tennessee River, and then created Kentucky Lake in 1944. It became the largest man-made lake east of the Mississippi River. Now, the dam and the reservoir displaced thousands of residents and submerged several towns. But a significant dysphoria from the region, it actually didn't occur at that point. Yes, it was seen as a nuisance. Yes, a lot of people had to kind of pick up and kind of move back away from the area where they were. But there really wasn't like a huge uproar at that point. Now, most people relocated to nearby communities. Some moved from the banks of the Tennessee to homes on the Cumberland to remain as river people, while others moved to between the rivers, which was, again, a section that they will later take over. Now, several families were displaced multiple times by the public project that followed. 2 decades later, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers blocked the flow of the nearby Cumberland River as well. And in 1963, President John F. Kennedy announced a plan to create the National Recreation Area to be known as what we know today, which is Land Between the Lakes. The plan would return the Between the Rivers area to a wild, natural state to attract visitors for camping, hunting, hiking, and other recreational activities. To accomplish this, every house, every farm, every business, every school, every church had to be acquired by the TVA through the government's power of eminent domain. Each parcel would be cleared, every structure demolished, and most signs of human settlement erased. Even though you go there now, you can still find like the foundations of old homesteads and things like that. But for the most part, it's just been leveled. Now, the federal government already owned 57,000-acre portions of the peninsula, a tract known as the Kentucky Woodlands National Wildlife Refuge, but the LBL project required, of course, more land. With the completion of Barkley Dam in 1966, the waters of the Cumberland piled up into Lake Barkley. In the process of creating the two lakes, residents of several small towns along and between the rivers were moved, and parts of some towns were basically just permanently flooded. They're under the lake. Engineers also dug out Barkley Canal in order to bring the two rivers and lakes to the same water level. This allowed ships and barges to move more easily, moving goods without a lock system from the Cumberland and Tennessee River Valley towards the mighty Mississippi River. Now, at this point, residents did start to protest and fought to keep their property, including a lawsuit that made it all the way through federal court. But in the end, the government took it all over, all like 170,000 acres. By this point, more than 800 families were forced out permanently. And from what I understand, there are some books that I'm going to give as recommended readings. They really didn't pay these people a lot of money. So, this was already kind of, I don't want to say an impoverished area. It wasn't really an impoverished area, but at the same time, they were still trying to get electricity and some of what we think of as modern conveniences kind of down in that area. And it just, from what I understand, it wasn't enough to really relocate. So they really got kind of swindled out of property that had been in their family for decades. So let's stop there for just a second, and I'm going to check the comments because we have got a slew of them coming in here. All right, let me get back up to where I was. So Stardust the Clown is from Alabama. Well, welcome, welcome. We are so glad to have you here in the crypt, and we hope you become a regular. And then Ivar, they're in, let's see, I think it said Wilbur. Was it Wilbur, Wisconsin? Let me take a look again. Hold on. Wilbur, Washington. I'm sorry. Oh, and look, we have Fang. Fang, we have missed you. We are so glad you're here. She says, hello, Odd Mama. Well, we are so glad you're here. Stardust the Clown is from Mumford, Alabama. That's very cool. We are almost neighbors. Almost neighbors. Not well, our states are. We are neighbors. So Ivar and Tia are traveling to different states each month. That sounds like a lot of fun, a whole lot of fun. And then Frank says, hello, Odd Mama. Hello, friend. Well, hello, friend. We are so glad you're here. And then we have Sean. Hi, Sean. How are you? We're going to be doing your shout out on You Can't Sit With Us. So Sean is a new subscriber for us over on Patreon. So we are so happy to have him there. And then Calvin's here. Hello, Calvin. How are you? We are so glad to have you here. Make sure I've got everybody. All right, I think I've got everybody. Okay, so basically, where we were at is that they have permanently moved out everybody. They flooded the area over 170,000 acres. Now, by the time they were done, the TVA and the Army Corps of Engineers had created one of the largest, like I said earlier, inland peninsulas in the United States. Now, over the years, hundreds of families were displaced with the construction of the dams, the bridges, and the roads. Homes, businesses, church, farms, schools were bulldozed and buried to create that national recreation area. Today, most vestiges of human habitation are gone, except for the 200 plus small cemeteries that dot the 170,000 acre expanse of the LBL, as well as some of like the foundations and things like that. Now, one thing about this area that you do need to know if you go to visit, cell phone service and GPS service is spotty within the park and is virtually non-existent on the back roads of the LBL. And you are suggested to make sure you have a map and a compass. And there are limited areas or roads to access the LBL. There are very few. I think there's more on the Tennessee side than there is on the Kentucky side. And these can sometimes be affected by flooding. So just keep that in mind if you go there to visit. Now, the town of Birmingham, Kentucky disappeared after Kentucky Lake filled it in the 1940s. In the 1960s, the towns of Eddyville and Cootawatta were demolished to make way for Lake Barkley. By 1970, nearly every resident of between the rivers had been moved out. The old, quote unquote, old areas are the proportions of the cities that were left above the water after the areas were flooded. Rather interesting things are revealed, however, when Kentucky Lake is at lower levels each year. The lake is lowered about 5 feet every July through the end of November, only to be raised in April to what they call summer pool levels. When the lake is low in the fall and winter months, you can often find bits and pieces of history scattered along the shoreline. One of these such areas is what some people call Cemetery Island. It is a very thin strip of land only visible when the lake is low, with one grave marker standing upright in the middle of a tiny low water island. Officially named Newburgh Cemetery, TVA records show the graveyard contained 28 known graves of people who likely lived around the Newburgh community when it was there. When the TVA created the lake, they usually relocated graves to other cemeteries on higher ground. Sometimes family members of the deceased, however, would not accept the relocation of the grave, or it is possible there were other reasons, such as the family line had died out, things like that. But not all were moved. Speaking of this particular cemetery in general, of the 28 graves at the Newburgh Cemetery, 23 of them were relocated to nearby Lone Oak Cemetery. However, 5 active graves do remain. Fort Campbell is a U.S. Army base that sits on the border of Tennessee and Kentucky and is surrounded by the land between the lakes. So I think you're getting kind of a feel of what this area is like. The base is located approximately 105,000 acres in Montgomery and Stewart counties, Tennessee, and Trigg and Christian counties in Kentucky. Most of the base is on the Kentucky side, but legally is identified as Kentucky. Fort Campbell is a United States Army installation located, and yes, you're going to find one of these towns or these areas familiar, astride, like I said, the Kentucky-Tennessee border between Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and Clarksville, Tennessee. Yes, Hopkinsville, Kentucky. So for our cryptid fans out there, I'm sure that name will ring a bell, even though I will give you a little backstory here in a second. Now, Fort Campbell is home to the 101st Airborne Division and the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. Now, Hopkinsville is best known by the Kelly-Hopkinsville encounter, which occurred August 21st of 1955. The Kelly-Hopkinsville encounter, also known as the Hopkinsville Goblins case or the Kelly Green Men case, was a claimed close encounter with extraterrestrial beings in 1955 near the communities of Kelly and Hopkinsville in Christian County, Kentucky, United States. And there, excuse me, if you read a little bit about the Hopkinsville goblins, there, and especially, oh gosh, what was that series? Heller is a very good series that got into this. They were kind of, if I remember correctly, kind of linked, leaning towards possible links to Mothman. So very interesting. Now, the land between the lakes is steeped in the history of the residents who lived between the rivers before they were removed. There were tales of Native American curses on white settlers who stole land from the local tribe, as well as hauntings and mysterious floating orbs in several of the more than 220 family cemeteries that still exist in the area. The area and its surrounding region have long held such dark legends from before the time of the first settlers who trickled into western Kentucky. But nestled deep in the land between the Lakes National Park, or the LBL, there lies a creature so terrifying as to strike fear into longtime enforcement officers, campers, and even seasoned hikers and hunters. While some descriptions of the creature vary as to its estimated size, most encounters concur it is a very tall, hairy, wolf-like creature that walks on two legs and could be or can be smelled from a great distance away, and it has glowing red eyes. And these accounts actually date back to the early 1700s, if not before. Some of the first Europeans in the region were the French trappers and hunters, who claimed that the forests were prowled by a massive beast, half man, half wolf, which would howl in the night and leave the mutilated carcasses of animals in its wake. A monstrous entity that was called the loup-garou. And I think we've covered the loup-garou before. When settlers began to come to the region, they were said to have been plagued by some large predator which lurked in the shadows, killing and maiming their livestock, with witnesses saying the culprit was a hairy, wolf-like beast on two legs, which unleashed blood-curdling howls and shrieks into the night. And that is not where these stories end. The sightings of the monster were still frequented throughout the beginning of the 20th century. There have seemingly been quite a lot of alleged encounters with the beasts of the land between the lakes, even up into modern times. There were groups of Boy Scouts that have seen it, several more campers, fishermen, and boaters that have seen it from the safety of their boats while floating in some of the many bays that touch up to the shoreline. Hikers and bikers have heard its howl and have seen something stalking them while they were on rural trails, hiding amongst the trees and foliage. Hunters have run across deer carcasses that have been brutally torn apart. In the meantime, others have come forward with their own experiences with the fierce, elusive beast and reports of a feeling of being watched, hearing howls, or coming across the badly mutilated carcasses of deers and other wildlife have come in on occasion. The one thing all of them agree on is this was no normal large animal, or even for the cryptid hunters, a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch. The legend of the beast goes back at least 100 years and was passed along through time from family to family and updated as new sightings occurred. Local residents have several tales of a wolf-like creature that stood on two legs that would come out of the thickets and attack their cattle and livestock. Day or night, it didn't matter. A creature that was taller than an average man by well over a foot and nearly 7 foot tall, with thick, long hair covering its body and a stench that matched that of the freshly opened graves that were discovered now and then. This wolf man left tracks like a barefooted man, but the toes should have, where the toes should have been, instead were more like a paw print, so to speak, like the toe areas of a paw print. The head was huge and a wolf-like in appearance, with an extra long snout and an uncanny long, sharp incisors that glistened from the moonlight with the saliva, along with eyes that radiated red like one of the hottest fires in hell. That's what they'd say. It had long arms that ended with huge hands and long, spindly fingers with long, pointed, dirt-caked claws. Just nightmare fuel, basically. At night, they would hear it howl, unnatural guttural sounds of painful hunger agony. And at that warning, all would go out and tie up their livestock and even bring their most prized selections inside their homes with them for protection. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to go to just a short commercial break. And then we're going to get into a very interesting story. And the thing about this particular story is you can find it from different perspectives. And I know we've talked about this before when we talk about urban legends versus kind of a like a folklore, is when there may be different stories, but the basis of the story stays pretty much the same. Really gives you more of an idea that it is based on something that happened. Whereas urban legends can kind of like, I don't know, I don't want to say not true, but a little bit more fanciful. And this particular story, you could actually find from different people's points of view that were either somehow involved directly or spoke with someone involved directly. So let's go ahead and go to a commercial break real quick, and then we're going to tackle the comments again, and then we'll get started on this story that I'm going to tell you. And it's pretty horrifying. All right, we'll be right back.
What's your emergency?
I wish to create a perfect human being, selecting the best organs from different organs. And war has now Murder's victims show evidence of having been partially devoured. It has been established that persons who have recently died have been returning to life.
Cause I got my Galaxy 500.
Get with your nearest cult member.
Double stacking is a noun that refers to the action in a horror movie of impaling both members of a canoodling couple.
The creation of the atomic bomb. What was it?
Oppenheimer?
The Manhattan Project.
The Manhattan.
And everything they're bringing up.
I was about to say the Philadelphia experiment. I mean, which one are we talking about here?
We go and look up. So I'm looking up heavy water. What does heavy water do to a person's body? And I'm like, okay, they're watching me now. I know they're watching me.
Don't you judge us! Don't you be judging us! You come in here with your book learning and your
And we're back. All right, so let's get over here to the comments. Looks like we've got a couple of comments, and then we can get on to this particular story. Yes, I can see your comment, Mr. Giggles. Hello, Mr. Giggles. So glad you are here. Okay, so Ivar says, what is the difference between a non-active and an active grave? Well, in this case, the graves are still there. The people's bodies, their corpses are still there. That would be an active grave. Like a non-active would be one that had been relocated. Is what I was, I guess, trying to articulate. Kind of like an active haunt, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, of the 28 that were in the Newburgh Cemetery, 5 were left for whatever reason, based on the TVA's records. So, yeah. Let's see. Oh, we have Nadine. Hello, Nadine. How are you? So glad you're here. Okay, I'm not sure what this is about, but Frank says if you pay us, then you can sit with us. Woo! Let's see. And then we have Hija here. Hello, Hija. She says hello, odd mother. And Star. Hello, Star. How are you? So glad you're here. All right. Let's see, make sure I didn't. I'm like the best about leaving somebody's comment just kind of sitting up there for the whole show. So I think I've got everybody turned off. Okay. All right. So let's get back over here. All right. So like I said, this story is about an experience um, of a particular situation that occurred in the LBL back in the 80s. This is from Jan Thompson's perspective. And I'm just going to read this out. I only made changes basically to get some of the descriptive words out and get it more pinpointed onto what is actually going on here. But I didn't change the story. I only just removed some descriptive words from the story. So to make it a little easier to flow. So this is the story told from Jan Thompson's perspective. Where I used to work, midnights at a gas station a few miles from the Kentucky Dam, which was a few miles from the beginning of the LBL in Grand Rivers, which is on the Kentucky side. And it was on one of these midnight shifts, I had 2 visitors that would change my outlook on the subject of werewolves, and I'm putting this in parentheses, and make me believe in what I had seen myself a few years back in the same area, but had kept in between myself and 2 other family members that were with me at the time. But she writes, that is another story for another time. Now, this story was never in the paper, on the news, or had any media attention at all. It was kept hush hush, and a sacred, understood silence was demanded on all those involved. It couldn't get out, ever. It was a few weeks before the beginning of tourist season, and tourists were what the locals survived on. So basically, they didn't want to upset people coming in and spending their money in the area, because this area actually, that's how they made their money, was off tourism. I wasn't witness to the fact, just a third person making observations and having a conversation with 2 individuals who were part of the incident, who were involved in the whole ordeal. They had just came from the crime scene down in the middle of the LBL after being there for 8 hours. It was around 3 in the morning, and they were taking a much needed reality break. 2 officers of the law, 2 grown men who both appeared shaken beyond description. A mixture of fear and confusion, shock and disbelief emanated from them both. One was paler than the other, almost a deadly pallor over his skin. And it was this one, and she basically names him Adam just to protect his identity, that had to sit on the curb of the gas pump, head between his legs, and expelling the last bits of his stomach contents. The other officer, she calls him Bill, came in for some coffee for himself and a cup of water for his partner, then rejoined Adam outside. There were no other customers, so I went outside with them to see if I could offer some assistance with the ill man. He gladly took the few Rolaids I had extended in my hand, and with his own shaky fingers, he struggled to get them into his mouth. For quite a long while, the only thing that was heard were the crickets in the nearby field, the sounds of bugs hitting the fluorescent lights above us hanging from the gas station canopy, and the distant sound of highway traffic that was few and far between, as it was in the wee hours of the morning. My mind was buzzing with various scenarios of the cause of their distress: a tragic car accident, possibly a motorcycle wreck, a boating mishap with drowned victims, a murder, a dead body discovered. I don't remember sitting down, but after about 15 minutes of the hushed stillness, I found myself beside them both on the curb, staring out at the darkness of the nearby corn pasture. Adam spoke first, breaking the silence. I can't believe it. It's not possible. I just can't believe it. He said, and in a hushed agreement that was almost inaudible, Bill replied, I know, it was so unbelievable. I've never seen anything like this before. And then there was a long pause, a deep breath, and he continued, or even heard of anything like this before. I looked at Bill and then at Adam. They were both gazing open-eyed, unblinking out into the night. Adam's bottom lip was trembling slightly. Something or something had filled them each with a congested fear. After a few more moments of silent reserve, my patience was rewarded with a slow, fragmented description of their past 8 hours. Bill turned his wide eyes towards me. They were gazed and bloodshot, tired and frightened. With a weary, shaken voice, he began to unfold a tale that would forever be embedded within my spirit like a nasty shadow that lingers around a corner waiting to pounce. Why he decided to tell me of all people was beyond my comprehension. Maybe it was an avenue he felt safe to travel on to get basically get it off his chest and off his mind. They were both frequent customers and we knew each other on first name basis. But to divulge such a torrid account of great magnitude, well, I can only say that the fear inside them both at that moment in that time must have had to be released, erased, or extracted, or else they may have gone mad. Without interrupting, I sat listening to every word for the next half hour or so. They had gotten a call to help with an investigation at one of the many rural campgrounds down in the LBL. The tourist season was about to start in a few weeks, so as usual, there were some early arrivals that had come to claim prime camping spots before the areas were overrun with tents, campers, and travel trailers. The sun was setting low in the sky when they arrived at the scene. Several other official vehicles were already there, and there were many more to come, as they would soon find out. Many coming from other counties. Several of these to come were coroners from different counties as well. One coroner vehicle was already present, as well as an ambulance, which would prove useless, as there was no one to save. The victims were all dead, quite dead, completely and totally and thoroughly deceased. A young married couple that had come down to take it easy for a few days. Basically, they were the first ones to discover the gas leak scene. Neither one of them wanted to stay behind while the other went for help, so they both nervously traveled to the nearest town, again on the Kentucky side, which is Grand Rivers, and called the authorities. They did not return to the LBL. They merely gave the arriving officer directions to the area of discovery and then rented a local hotel room. With the sun going down, it got dark pretty fast. So there was a flurry of floodlights from the cruisers being pointed in all directions, along with the excited movements of $50 flashlights being held by nervous, restless hands searching the trees, the ground, the leaves, and the shadows. There was a parked motorhome at the site, its frame being lit by a campfire close by, a fire that had almost went out on its own, but had been rekindled by the new crowd of men in uniform so that they could basically have more light and see a little bit easier. The front and back doors of the travel trailer home were open, one of the doors hanging by one hinge in a crooked slant. Through the windows, they could see zigzag movement of luminous lights, and beams from the flashlight searched the interior. Bloody handprints slid down the thin metal walls close to the front door, and more bloody handprints could be seen along the length towards the back door. Adam and Bill did not even want to imagine what was inside the motorhome, but then again, they would soon find out. And it wasn't what was inside, but what was outside that would change their life forever. There was already crime scene tape placed in the numerous scattered parts of the area, little white flags on metal stakes stuck in the ground marking evidence of ripped clothing, bodies, body parts, separated limbs, a pile of bowels, pieces of loose flesh clinging to muscle tissue, with what used to be 3 bodies that just hours before had been a happy family on a happy vacation to create happy memories for years to come, a father, a mother, and a young son. The happiness was gone, destroyed by a psychotic madman or possibly men. A murderous rage that had taken place, one so abhorrently appalling that there were few witnesses to the scene that had kept their composure or held their recently eaten dinners down. At first sight, the victims appeared to be butchered by some unnamed weapon, possibly an axe or a chainsaw, but upon further inspection by the first arriving coroner, the wounds on the bodies were determined not to have been caused by a sharp instrument, but rather by some piercing, well-defined claws and other wounds by some keen, long incisors. Wildcat, bear, wolves? The coroner shook his head in a bafflement disagreement with each guess from the officers. The claw marks, for instance, on the back of the father's corpse were distinctively made by 4 long claws with a smaller digit, like a thumb, on the side. Its span was wider than a man's print, wider and different than a bear's mark, with deep, deliberate gouges in the flesh. Rake marks from an angry, unknown source trying to grab its prey was no doubt trying to escape. The wildcat and the wolves theory was dismissed as the open wound marks were apparently made by a more grandiose animal source. The bite marks were much larger than a mountain lion, wolf, or coyote. Whatever it was had a longer snout and a more sizable set of teeth. There was also indications in the larger areas of the cadavers of bite marks where the flesh, meat, and bone had been yanked away from the body. Like a human who bites into an apple and leaves the impression of his bite and teeth marks, so were the open wounds on these individuals. Bears, well, they aren't native to the area, but who knows? Maybe a grizzly did sneak in some way, but that was far-fetched. He would have to have had traveled several states and across several rivers to even get close to that part of Kentucky. Everyone present was betting on the bear hypothesis anyway, and no one even thought of anything else to be the cause of such savage attacks. A bear, it had to be a bear. From the back door of the motorhome, an officer stepped slowly down. holding in his hand some type of garment, a dress, a small dress that would fit a small girl of around 5 years old. He informed the onlookers that there were more little girl clothing packed inside the coach. This meant there was a missing person or an absent body, a member of the family. Of course, they all prayed she was still alive somehow, hiding somewhere. So a new search began. As time went by, additional law enforcement employees arrived, as well as a few volunteer rescue squad members. Groups were spread out and assigned areas to examine and explore. Another coroner arrived to assist in the identification and causes of death, and much later, a third one showed up, this one from a nearby state, probably most likely Tennessee. All types of samples were placed in plastic bags, marked as evidence, and carefully stowed away. As they were packing up what appeared to be one of the father's arms, one of the doctors noticed something wrapped between the dead fingers. Some tweezers slowly untangled a clump of long gray and brown hair. This too was placed in a bag, marked, and put away to be analyzed in a lab later. From somewhere in the nearby woods, about 50 yards from the campfire, a scream was heard. A man's shriek that turned into a long wail and then into a whimper. As others arrived, they could see by the gleam of several flashlights that the officer was holding his hat in one hand and his light in the other. There was blood on his face, the front of his shirt, and on the brim of his hat. More blood could be seen dripping on him, and it was coming from above. High in the trees, the flashlight swung, searching for the source of the mysterious bleeding. A very small hand could be seen dangling down from the tree limbs, way up high, as well as a slender, lifeless leg that still had a white sock still on the foot. The missing child had been located. It had been, in fact, Adam, the officer, that the blood had trickled upon, hitting his hat first, making him look up, and then feeling the thick, cold fluid sprinkle across his face, then sliding down his neatly buttoned shirt. It had been Adam that had screamed. The little girl had apparently been carried up the tree and leisurely eaten upon while carefully laid across the large tree branch. More of the same long gray and brown hair was found sticking in the bark in that tree near her body. Now, a good source, if you want a lot more to the stories and the backstories and the lab results and things like that, that this story, well, not this story came from, but other variations of this story, like from other people's points of view, I would suggest Steve Posse's book, The LBL Massacre, and you can find a link in our on our website to our Amazon store. I've already got a curated list of everything that we've discussed this season, and that's one of them. Now, like I said, he does give more details on the story in his book, as well as some additional stories, but he also does write, as far as this story is concerned, the author is told by a reliable source and a retired law enforcement officer that a record does in fact exist in Lyon County, Kentucky, of this family's demise. But if you attempt to obtain this record, you will be met with great hostility. So that got, that kind of got my curiosity peaked. So I know you have to be really careful with Reddit, but one of the good things with Reddit is if you go down into the comments, a lot of times you can kind of get an idea, especially from locals or from someone that knows a lot about a particular subject, like, they're familiar with it in whatever way, whether on a personal level or whatever. Your comment section is a really good area to kind of get a gist of whether it's something that may or may not be true, or what have you. So I did go down into the comment areas because there were people discussing this particular story. And I did find this. I'm not including the name to protect this person's privacy, but it basically states, I live just east of the LBL Kentucky side. This event and the supposed cover-up is a well-known thing in the area/town. It is a bit of a local legend, if you will. Not commenting on the legitimacy of the massacre itself, just pointing out, and basically he's responding to someone, your comment is totally irrelevant due to there being several people, elderly included, that know about this story. There was a family that was killed out there back in the 70s/80s, for sure. But as to whether they were torn to shreds and if they had a little girl who was found 20 feet up in a tree or there being a cover-up is up to speculation, like all cryptid encounters and stories. I suggest, however, you look into the insane amount of bodies that have been found in the LBL area, particularly the Kentucky side. And I've heard that in several places that the Kentucky side seems to be a lot more active. There's definitely something disturbing going on out there. I've spent half of my 27 years in these woods and waters. I've heard and seen some really creepy shit myself. Me and a friend both heard a metallic clanking noise out there one night. And we're going to get into that on Patreon because there's another story that I'm going to tell you about that is absolutely horrific from an actual person that was hunted by this, like a first person account, and they were lucky enough to get away. However, somebody they met was not lucky enough to get away. Let's see. So me and a friend both heard a metallic clanking noise out there one night. We stayed in our tent the rest of that night. So something had to have happened out there. And I find it interesting that this metallic clanking noise is referred to a lot with this area prior to really weird, high strangeness stuff occurring. So the beast of the land of the lake, or the land between the lakes, is it an actual werewolf, as some have claimed? No one really knows, but it remains an unsettling case of what might or might not be roaming about the wilderness of the land between the lakes. Something very strange and dangerous indeed. So there's something, there's stuff that goes on out there, and just I think too, if you go with kind of the stone tape theory, how land and certain rock compositions and things like that can pick up on negative feelings. I mean, you had all those people that were moved out of there that had such close ties to that land. You had towns and graveyards that were flooded, and some bodies still remaining. So it's a very odd place, a very, very odd place. There's very few ways into it. Those way, as far as roads, those roads can be affected by flooding. I actually looked it up on Google Maps, and right now I think it's the Tennessee side, but I'm not really sure. But they had like a thing saying that some of the roads in were being affected by flooding. So if you were to get caught out there in a bad storm, I mean, you might be screwed. Especially being that cell service is very spotty and non-existent in some of the back areas of the LBL, and that's 170,000 acres. So we're going to get to the comments real quick, and then I'm going to give you kind of just a taste of what we're going to be talking about in the Patreon. And of course, if you're interested in becoming a supporter to our $5 tier, head on over there when it's time. The link is up in the top of this particular stream, and help us help support us. And you do get additional content as well as exclusive content, and a lot of really interesting stuff. So let's see what's going on in the comments real quick. Well, Halja says, was an American Werewolf in London? It sure does, based on the description of it. It sounds like the traditional American Werewolf in London type dog man werewolf thing. It sounds terrifying. Frank says, but what about the wind wolves? I don't know. I guess they're the ones that kind of hang out on the sideline. Oh, thank you. So Stardust says they are enjoying these stories. Well, I'm glad. I'm glad. I like to kind of bring you somewhat obscure. This one isn't quite as obscure as some of the ones that we do, but when you look at the obscure, there's so many that you run across that you're like, why don't more people know about this? Like, it rivals some of the well-known, like unsolved true crime and just different things like that, cryptids, ghost stories, things like that, like what we covered last time, which was the Black Sisters of Virginia. I am just so surprised that it's not as well known. It's not well known, considering just how batshit crazy it was. Well, they go into that. Now you gotta remember too. This was back in the early '80s when this particular situation occurred, and there is a lot of rumors. So Ivar is basically asking, can you do DNA? There's a lot of rumors that because this area relies so much on tourism, that they really don't want this aspect to get out. There's some suggestions, and again, it's up for your consideration whether you believe it or not. But there are some, question as to whether the military may be involved. Because if you've ever noticed, anytime there's something weird that goes on, there always seems to be a military base somewhere nearby. And this is really close to Hopkinsville, where they had the Hopkinsville Goblin. There's a lot of caves in that area. A lot of those caves connect, they do believe, the Mammoth Caves from Missouri, because that is just a huge cave system. So just a lot of really interesting what ifs. So that's what they're saying. I'm sure now they could. I'm sure probably much like the basement of the Vatican, they may already have that information. And they do go into that. What was his name? Steve Causey, in the LBL massacre. He does go into that as far as like the hair itself that was held for evidence. If I remember correctly, it came back as basically an unknown animal. So, and again, that was back in that time, they did not have the DNA capability that they have now. So it's all going to depend on, if they don't have it, did they save that evidence for DNA capture now, or do they have the evidence, they're just not letting it out? So that's a really long answer to your question. All right, so I am going to, let's see, we're keeping pretty good with time. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of give you a kind of an overview of what we're going to be talking about over on Patreon. So this next story comes from a retired sheriff by the name of Martin Grove, and it involves his terrifying account while him and a partner and good friend were hunting out in the LBL. Now this happened in the early 1990s. He details his experience and talks about his law enforcement background and what made him uniquely capable in these moments, but also still broke him as far as witnessing what he witnessed and experienced. This took place, like I said, in the early 90s, 1993 to be specific, while he was camping at the land between the lakes with his hunting partner who, out of respect for his friend, who has recently passed away, he's kept his friend's name anonymous, and he refers to his friend in both his story, and he also wrote a book about his experience, because there's so much more involved with this story that we're not going to really have time to get into. But so it kind of goes, a lot more in depth. They embark on what was supposed to be a relaxing weekend hunting trip in the scenic region. However, as nightfall descends, tranquility, normalcy, and normalcy gives way to a stalking creature, and the hunters themselves find themselves being the hunted as reality falls to the wayside. So it is a really, really cool story, a terrifying story, and they did literally shit their pants, literally. So that's what we're going to talk about over there on Patreon, as well as that metallic clanking sound. And that happens a lot more than people realize. And there are a lot of people that say, does this have to do with, and I'm not really like a big Sasquatch or Bigfoot like cryptid enthusiast. I do think it's cool. But you have, from what I understand, a lot of people that are really into like Sasquatch and Bigfoot believe that they're basically kind of a they're not from this dimension. They're interdimensional travelers. And you start getting into like topics like vortexes and things such as like what you find out at Skinwalker Ranch. When these vortexes or portals open, a lot of people believe that that opening will make a noise. And that's what a lot of people contribute to this clanking metallic sound to. And like I said, I was super surprised to find out how often this happens. This happens all over the United States, and news reports on it, and they can't figure out what it is. So we're going to go into that, as well as I have some audio analysis clips of the actual howls of what they have reported in the LBL versus the analysis of what a normal coyote owl looks like, or a red timber wolf, or things along those lines, a bear. And so it's pretty interesting. So we're going to kind of go into that as well. So join me over there if you want to hear more about it on our expansion. And to let you know, if you do become a $5 subscriber, you get the whole, like when you go over there to see the expansion, you get the whole stream as well as the expansion on the end. So that way you don't have to watch the full, one part of the stream on a different platform versus the Patreon platform. It's all included in the same stream for you. You just have an extended version of like tonight's stream that will go into a lot of things that we're going to talk about later. So I hope you guys have a great summer. I look forward to seeing you guys again in the fall, getting ready for spooky season. And of course, I will see our Patreons over on Patreon throughout the summer season with some exclusive content that we'll be doing. And I hope you guys have nothing but pleasant nightmares this summer. Bye, guys. Well, let's get over here and get it set up so we can move on over to Patreon. See you later.